the firelight that remembered us. The fire burned low and steady, breathing sparks into the dark like fireflies trying to escape. Two families sat around it, coolers cracked open, laughter spilling freely, the clink of bottles echoing softly through the trees. The woods had swallowed them whole, miles from the nearest road where cell signals died, and the night felt older than memory. Pines towered overhead, their black silhouettes knitting together into a ceiling that blocked the stars. Someone joked that this was the kind of place horror movies started. Someone else laughed a little too hard. They had come to drink, to forget work and schedules and the dull hum of civilization. Children slept sipped inside tents behind them, their breathing faint and trusting. The adults passed stories and liquor, voices rising and falling with the wind. Every so often, something moved in the brush, just a deer, probably, but each sound lingered a second longer than it should have. The woods felt attentive, as if it were listening. Then the light came. It wasn't lightning. There was no thunder, no build-up, no warning. A sudden, violent white flash exploded deep in the forest, bright enough to cast sharp shadows behind every tree, every face frozen mid-expression. For a split second, the world turned flat and colorless, like a photograph burned into the air. Bottles slipped from fingers. Someone screamed. Someone else whispered, "What the hell was that?" Before anyone could answer, the woods far away began to glow. Not all at once, but in sections. Hillsides and tree lines ignited with a sickly, pale illumination, as if the forest itself were lighting up from within. The light crawled through the trees, pulsing slowly, deliberately. It wasn't fire. Nothing burned. No smoke rose. The glow revealed impossible depth between trunks, shadows bending where they shouldn't, stretching too long, folding in on themselves. The forest no longer looked like a place, it looked like a thing. No one moved. The fire crackled behind them, suddenly too loud, too small. Every instinct screamed to run, but no one knew where. The glow wasn't approaching yet. It simply existed, humming faintly, vibrating in the chest like distant machinery or a massive breath being drawn. One of the men raised his flashlight with shaking hands and aimed it toward the light, then stopped. The beam seemed to vanish before reaching the trees, swallowed whole. That's when the forest went silent. No insects. No wind. No distant animals. Even the fire seemed to dim, as if embarrassed by its own weakness. And in that absolute quiet, someone realized the glow wasn't random. It was moving with purpose. And something had noticed them. The dogs were the first to break. Two large shapes burst from the darkness near the tents, both family dogs, hackles raised, teeth bared, growling low in their throats. They circled the fire once, frantic, nails scraping against stone, eyes locked on the glowing forest. Someone shouted for them to stop. Another reached out, fingers brushing fur, too late. With a single shared snarl, the dogs bolted toward the light. Their barks echoed sharply at first, confident and aggressive, cutting into the stillness as they disappeared between the trees. For a brief moment, the sound was comforting, familiar. Dogs chasing something strange but noble. Something that could be scared off. Then the barking changed. It dropped in pitch, twisting into sharp, panicked yelps. The sound didn't move closer or farther away, it warped, as if the woods were bending it, chewing it apart. A sudden whine pierced the dark, followed by a choking silence so abrupt it made several people stand up at once. Seconds passed. Then the dogs came back. They didn't run so much as stumble out of the trees, bodies low to the ground, tails tucked so tightly they looked broken. One of them slid into the edge of the firelight and collapsed, ribs heaving, foam dripping from its mouth. The other paced in tight, frantic circles, eyes wide and unfocused, whining like it couldn't remember how to bark. Their fur was damp not with water, but sweat. Hot. Trembling. What did they see? Someone whispered. Neither dog would look toward the forest again. When one of the children stirred in a tent, the dogs lunged toward the sound, panicked, desperate to herd everyone together away from the trees. That's when the father stood. Without saying much, the two men exchanged a glance, the kind made between people who knew arguing was pointless. One grabbed a heavy flashlight. The other picked up a hatchet from beside the fire. Their voices were calm, too calm, as they told everyone to stay put. Keep the fire going. Don't follow. Don't let the kids wake up. If we're not back in 10 minutes, one of them said, forcing a smile, then you start packing. They disappeared into the woods. The glow swallowed them almost immediately. At first, nothing happened. The light pulsed slowly, breathing. The forest remained silent, oppressive. Every second stretched thin. Someone checked a watch. Someone else counted breaths. The dogs whimpered softly, pressing against legs, shaking so hard their teeth clicked. Then came a sound. Not footsteps, movement. Branches bending without snapping. Leaves rustling without wind. The flashlight beam flickered in the distance once, twice, then vanished. A low, distant thump echoed through the trees, felt more than heard, like something massive shifting its weight. 9 minutes passed. Then the men burst back into the clearing. They were drenched in sweat, shirts clinging to them as if they'd run miles. Faces pale. Eyes wide and unfocused. One of them dropped the flashlight. It was cracked, dead. The other still clutched the hatchet so tightly his knuckles were white. We're leaving, one of them said immediately, voice hoarse. Now. No discussion. What happened? Someone asked. We don't have time, the other snapped. Grab the kids. Grab what you can carry. We leave now. Panic rippled through the group as people rushed toward the tents, yanking zippers, waking children. Coolers were abandoned. Chairs toppled. The fire was kicked apart, embers scattering like fleeing stars. Then someone froze. The car's a woman said slowly. Which way was the trail? Everyone stopped. They turned in a slow circle, flashlights sweeping the trees. Paths that should have been obvious were gone, no dirt road, no clearing, no familiar markers. Just trees. Endless, identical trees, standing shoulder to shoulder, glowing faintly in the distance as the pale light pulsed once more. The woods hadn't just lit up. It had rearranged itself. Voices rose over one another, frantic at first, everyone talking, no one listening. Hands waved. Flashlights jittered uselessly across the trees. Someone swore they were standing in the same place they'd walked in from earlier. Someone else insisted the trail curved left, not right. The fathers tried to speak at once, then stopped, breathing hard, realizing panic was winning. Everyone stop, one of them said, forcing his voice steady. We're not thinking straight. The glow in the woods had faded. Whatever pale light once pulsed between the trees had bled away into ordinary darkness. Crickets returned, tentative at first, then louder, braver. The fire crackled normally again. The forest suddenly looked like a forest. Embarrassment crept in. Nervous laughter followed. Someone cracked open another drink, the PSSHH of the can slicing through the tension. A joke landed, something about bad liquor and overactive imaginations. A few laughs came too quickly, too loudly. The dogs settled near the fire, still tense but no longer shaking. One of the fathers wiped his face and shook his head like he'd just woken from a nightmare. Probably a flare, someone said. Or lightning behind the ridge, another added. Yeah. That makes sense. The children went back to sleep. Chairs were righted. Bottles were passed again. Stories resumed, forced at first, then easier. The woods felt familiar once more, dark but harmless. The kind of dark people had trusted for generations. A woman frowned suddenly. Did it smell like metal to anyone else? She'd asked. No one answered. They drank. They laughed. They convinced themselves the fear had been a shared hallucination, adrenaline feeding on alcohol, shadows turning into monsters because the night was deep and their minds were weak. For a while, it worked. Then something moved. It came from the direction where the light had been. At first it sounded like an animal, slow, deliberate steps, leaves compressing under weight. A deer, maybe. A bear. Someone lifted a flashlight, half annoyed, half relieved at the normal explanation. But the sound didn't wander. It came straight toward them. Sep. Pause. Sep. Each footfall was perfectly spaced, unnaturally even. No huffing breath. No snapping branches. Just the steady approach of something that didn't need to rush. The dogs stood at once, ears pinned back, teeth bared, but they didn't bark. One let out a low, broken whine and backed away from the fire. Then another set of steps joined the first. Two shapes emerged between the trees. Tall. Thin. Side by side. They didn't reflect the firelight at first, just swallowed it, like silhouettes cut from deeper darkness. The group went silent as one, laughter evaporating, drinks forgotten mid-air. No one spoke. No one breathed. The figures crossed the edge of the clearing and began to step into the firelight. The firelight finally touched their faces. A scream ripped from someone's throat before their mind could catch up to what their eyes were seeing. The two figures were the fathers. Not like them. Exactly them. Same height. Same clothes down to the sweat-darkened collars, the same rip at the knee of one man's jeans, the same baseball cap bent slightly out of shape. Even the mud streaks on their boots matched. They stepped forward in perfect, unconscious familiarity, eyes squinting against the firelight just as the real men had done minutes earlier. Every head snapped back toward the group. The original fathers stood there alive, breathing, just as real, staring at themselves. For a heartbeat, the world broke. That's not funny, one of the men whispered, his voice trembling as he looked at his double. The other shook his head violently. No. No. That's not me. The duplicates stopped at the edge of the fire, standing where the originals had stood earlier, mirroring posture and stance like reflections lagging behind glass. One of them opened his mouth. Get away from them, the duplicate said calmly. They aren't us. The sound of his voice identical, down to the hoarse edge, sent a wave of nausea through the group. No. The real father shouted, stepping forward. Those aren't us. Don't listen to them. Both pairs spoke at once now. They came from the woods. They're lying. They followed the light. We did. Everyone backed away instinctively, forming a wide, terrified circle. The dogs lost control, then barking, snapping, pulling against collars, torn between near identical men they knew. One of the children cried out from a tent, confused and half awake. How can there be two of you? Someone sobbed. The duplicates looked confused by the question, genuinely so. One glanced at his hands, flexing his fingers like he was checking they still worked. The other looked past the fire toward the trees, brow furrowing. We came back, the duplicate said slowly. Just like we said we would. That's impossible, the real man shouted. We came back already. Silence fell again, thick, choking. Everyone looked from one father to the other. Same memories. Same urgency. Same fear. Both versions swore they were real. Both pleaded. Both begged their wives and children to believe them. And that was the worst part. There was no wrong detail. No crack in the act. No difference to point to. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks into the air. And in that flickering light, someone realized something far more terrifying than the duplicates themselves. Both versions were afraid. And neither of them knew which one was supposed to exist. The shouting collapsed into chaos. Fingers pointed wildly, wives screaming names, children crying, dogs barking in terror as both versions of the fathers shouted over one another, voices cracking, overlapping, identical. Someone fell to their knees, clutching their head. Another person raised a bottle as if it were a weapon, then dropped it, hands shaking too badly to hold anything at all. And then the light returned. It didn't come from the trees this time. It came from above. A sudden, blinding white glow poured down over the clearing, swallowing the fire, the people, the sound. Shadows flattened and vanished. The air vibrated violently, like standing inside a bell that had just been struck. Everyone screamed or thought they did, but no sound escaped. The world stretched thin, pulled tight, and snapped. The fire burned low and steady. Bottles clinked. Laughter echoed through the trees. Someone was in the middle of a joke. For a long, terrible moment, no one realized anything was wrong. Then a woman stopped laughing mid-breath. She looked down at her hands, steady, clean, holding a drink that had been empty minutes ago. The fire pit was intact. The tents were zipped. The children hadn't gone to sleep yet. Coolers were full. Chairs were upright. It was the beginning of the trip. Every head turned slowly, counting faces. 2 fathers. 1 of each. No duplicates. No sweat-soaked shirts. No panic in their eyes yet. Did we already do this? Someone whispered. Memories slammed into them all at once. The flash. The glowing forest. The dogs running. The duplicates. Hands flew to mouths. One of the men staggered backward, knocking over his chair. A woman began to cry quietly, shaking her head over and over as if refusing to wake from a dream she hadn't fallen asleep in. We were here before, one father said slowly. We know what happens. No, someone else argued desperately. We thought we were. That was the drinking. The dark. Group panic. But no one could fully convince themselves. They tested reality in small, frightened ways. Someone walked to the edge of the clearing and scratched their name into a tree-deep, angry lines in the bark. Another checked the time. Another checked again. The dogs sat alert, ears up, watching the forest like it owed them something. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Relief crept in, fragile and thin. Laughter returned again, quieter, cautious. Someone said maybe they'd shared the same nightmare. Someone else said the mind could do incredible things when fear fed on itself. A drink was passed. Then another. That's when the dogs stood up. Slowly. Every head turned as one. Far in the distance, between the trees, a pale glow flickered, weak at first, like a dying star struggling to be seen. Then it strengthened, pulsing faintly, deliberately, exactly as before. No one screamed this time. No one ran. They stared at one another, breath shallow, hearts pounding with the terrible certainty that this wasn't a hallucination, it was a cycle. "It's happening again," someone said. A long silence followed. Then, one by one, they stood. If the woods were going to take something from them, they would see what. Flashlights were grabbed. Hands were held. The fire was left burning behind them as they stepped forward together toward the light, this time into the trees that had already proven they remembered them. They moved together this time. No shouting. No running. Just slow, careful steps through the woods, flashlights cutting narrow tunnels through the dark. The glow ahead pulsed faintly, steady, guiding them deeper. Leaves crunched underfoot, but the forest no longer felt vast, it felt tight, like walls closing in. The dogs stayed close, pressed to legs, trembling but obedient. Then they heard it. Voices. Laughter. A burst of sound, bottles clinking, someone coughing mid-laugh, a familiar cadence carried effortlessly through the trees. Relief hit them so hard it made knees weak. "Oh, thank God," someone whispered. "Other people," another said, almost crying. "There are other people here." They pushed through the last line of trees. Firelight bloomed ahead. A perfect campsite opened before them, chairs arranged in a loose circle, coolers nearby, tents behind. A fire burned low and steady, sparks lifting into the night. A group of people sat around it, laughing, drinking, relaxed in a way that felt impossibly safe. "Hey!" one of the fathers shouted, stepping forward. "We've been lost, can you help us?" The people at the fire looked up. Smiles vanished. Every face drained of color. Because the people sitting around that fire were them. Not similar. Not close. Exact. Same jackets. Same chairs. Same woman leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. Same man mid-laugh, bottle raised halfway to his mouth. Same children just behind the fire, half asleep, wrapped in blankets. Time stuttered. Both groups stood at once. "What the hell is this?" Someone yelled from the fire. "No, what is this?" Someone yelled from the trees. Finger pointing exploded instantly. "That's me." "No, I'm me." They followed us. They came out of the woods. The dogs lunged toward their doubles, barking in confusion, then skidded to a stop, whining, trapped between identical scents. Flashlights swung wildly, beams crossing, blinding, revealing no flaw, no difference, only mirrored terror on every face. One woman stepped closer to her duplicate, tears streaming down both of their faces at the same time. "I remember everything," they both said together. The fire cracked loudly. Everyone froze. A low hum rolled through the forest behind them. Slowly, painfully, every head turned. Far beyond the clearing, past both camps, deeper in the woods, a brilliant white light ignited between the trees. Brighter than before. Wider. Pulsing as if it were opening. And for the first time, both groups understood the same impossible truth at once. They weren't finding other people. They were finding the next version of themselves. The end.